What's going on, guys? It's Liam here, and in today's video I'll be reviewing the patch notes for the next expansion of Wallaroo, the Nightmare. Now I'm going to talk about the positives right away because most of this video is probably going to be negative, because in my opinion, in terms of non-PvE content, this is one of the worst updates we've seen over the past 3 years on Wiz. I'll talk about that later, why, what the timestamp, so you can skip forward to it if you are a PvP or advanced player. So let's talk about the positives with the patch notes real quick here. And obviously, well, address the elephant in the room, that is the Nightmare itself. Now, I think most people are very intrigued by, the title of the dungeon and, the whole Freddy Krueger thing they have going on, which is pretty cool. I talked about this in a previous video. You can check that out if you want to for more details on the Nightmare dungeon. They also recently tweeted some teasers for the dungeon as well. I did not make a video on it, but I'll post it in this one just in case you haven't seen it. But looks really cool, and by the sounds of it, it's going to be a very challenging dungeon with a lot of aspects from the raid itself. So yeah, it will be dropping early next week, so that's going to be probably, my guess is Monday or Tuesday of the upcoming week. I'd say this was confirmed over on Twitter from the official Wizard101 Twitter account. Now, this is probably going to be the part that upsets a lot of PvE players, is the fact that the regular PvE standard, like, easy content for the Nightmare is not going to be there at release next week. It's going to be the advanced mode, challenge mode content. Now, I'm assuming most players don't even know what that is, or they just haven't really cared to do it in the past in like Wallaroo or previously before that. Advanced has a whole different kind of rule set, right? Spells that are like marked with no PvP, like Triton or Owl, cannot be used in PvE if it is advanced, like the dungeon will be in the Nightmare or like a raid. So I think a lot of players are going to be excited to do this dungeon, go in there, and probably get their butt kicked because a lot of their stuff is banned or no PvP, like enchants, for example, in PvE. So it'll be funny, and I'm really looking forward to see who is the first team, in the game to actually beat the dungeon. I did hear that they are giving away like a prize, I think, to the first team that does beat the dungeon on challenge mode. So I'm really interested for that, and just to get the gear, obviously gonna be really good gear. But yeah, I think a lot of players are gonna be unhappy with the difficulty of this, especially the vast majority of the PvE audience who obviously don't really understand a lot of the advanced stuff and the rules that apply in advanced combat. I do have videos on my channel explaining Rochambeau and advanced content if you guys want to check them out. That will help you out a lot, probably, with this dungeon, so I'd recommend checking those out if you are a more casual player who does not understand challenge mode or advanced. Okay, so let's talk about the bad things about the update. But yeah, let's talk about the PvP slash raid changes that has the community freaking out the past couple of days. I was going to make separate videos on this, but I figured I would include everything in the one giant update in this video. So, yeah, I'm just going to bring up the patch notes here so you guys can read along with me. Okay, so the first bad change that's going to be affecting raids and PvP is Blade and Trap Gambits with damage as a result have had their conditional damage reduced. Now, this has happened, I believe, because of how broken Trap Stack has been in the PvP meta. Obviously, this is another change that's going to obviously destroy the whole raid strategy for the most part. I know a lot of raiders are not happy with this, along with another change we'll see later on in the patch notes here. But again, this is just not a good change. But just because Trap Stack is broken in PvP and has no counters doesn't mean Blade Stack is broken in PvP and has no counters, right? There's Earthquake, and all 7 schools run Banshee because of how overpowered and oppressive it's been. The entire community has been saying this for 6 months. Minotaur Bottom Path, which is the one that breaks shields, damage in the trap has been reduced. Now, this is a bad change because shields are already the best Gambit in the game. They're free Gambit, and the counters already don't work. So you took one of the counters that, I mean, hardly anybody used it because it, like I said, it doesn't work. And then you nerfed the trap and the damage on it. It was only really good on Myth. So if you're looking to nerf Myth, I mean, I guess, but this also indirectly nerfs everything else, you know? So, because shield stack and shield gambits are meta, you would expect to see buffs to the shield counters, but instead they nerfed it. Maybe in hopes of just a nerf Myth in the meta, I guess, but they could have also just like banned TC Minnow or something, or TC Bassi. I don't know, just something more effective than nerfing the whole game. Hero of Chrysalis damage reduced on the Myth Rat as well, which is pretty good. That's probably the only good change to this whole update, I'm gonna be honest. Now, these are supposed to be Storm buffs. Now, I'm just gonna flat out say it, I don't think these are Storm buffs, guys, except for Shark and Sultan, which we haven't seen yet, obviously. I don't think these are Storm buffs. I'm gonna explain why. So increased damage and blade values for Reap the Whirlwind, Storm Shark, Pip Bottom Path. I don't know what the Pip means there. Triton Bottom Path, and Iron Sultan. The worst thing they could have done is buff the blade like Reap the Whirlwind. And the reason I say that's the worst thing is because of how broken and oppressive Banshee is, sorry, in the meta. Right? We've been saying this for 6 months now, every single day. Myself on my stream, in my videos, other creators as well, anyone with high rank, anybody in the Discord, everybody's been saying how broken Banshee is, right? So it doesn't matter if you make Reap and Triton 2000 percentage blades, if all 7 schools can run Banshee for as cheap as it is and set up a Gambit and put you behind by like 50% in 3 rounds of tempo or something, like it doesn't matter how good the blades are if they're not protected. You know what I mean? So I'm really hoping that Triton is not a buff to the blade like Reap, because then essentially they put development time into something that's going to do nothing, which obviously, considering we don't get a lot of updates, is not a good change, right? Instead of doing this Reap and Triton change, assuming the blades are better on Triton, right? They could have nerfed Burn and Hydra, or, you know, Hydra and Pop, or, you know, I don't know, Shield Gambits, Banshee, you know, anything meta related, right? But instead they chose to do this. Changes like this really feels like they just put all the Storm cards in like a RNG simulator on Google, and they're like, oh, what came out? Triton, Iron Sultan, Reap, and Shark. Okay, let's just buff those ones randomly, instead of actually listening to the community feedback about the problems of Storm, and the problems indirectly affecting Storm in the meta, like all 7 schools running Banshee because of how broken it is, right? They won't listen to that, but they'll just do stuff like this, which, again, very unhappy about this change for Storm. Now, this is what has the entire community very, very upset. Now, to put this in perspective, guys, I want you, before we read this next point, the entire PvP community has been, I don't want to say unplayable. Most of the community can agree that this is top 3 worst metas in 5th Age. I would argue this is the 2nd worst meta, almost the worst meta. For the past 6 months, it's been the same meta. Okay. The community has been complaining about the same cards like Banshee, Hydra, Burn, you know, Pop. I mean, just Myth being able to stone Minnow, you know, Shield Gambits as well, right? Stuff like that is what's been complained about in the meta. Cosplayers as well. Trap stack, I almost forgot those. How could I? Sorry, my bad. But that's what the community's been upset about, right? So, after 6 months of players quitting, and only 3 out of the 7 of the schools being playable in the meta, and everyone's been like hyped for this update to see like the meta actually change because it's been 6 months of this garbage, what do they do instead of listening to the community feedback? Shield Gambits have been buffed. I think this has to be one of the most, I'm sorry to the devs as you're watching this, but one of the most delusional changes I have ever seen in any game I've played in my life. Like, just like the sheer timing of this, right? You know your community has been upset and only 3 of the 7 schools are playable in the meta. And then you take 2 out of the 3 playable schools and then buff them. You buff them. right? If you wanted to buff Ice, you could just buff Ice Scion and like Beetle and Colossus. I mean, that's cool. Ice needs that. That's okay. But buffing them all doesn't get Ice anywhere. That only makes Ice better against the other schools that are also not also the other schools that are unplayable. It makes them better against the other unplayable schools, right? So it doesn't really do much at all by doing this. You're just like, again, wasting resources and making your community unhappy. I mean, some people are predicting that they're making Tri-Shields 1 pip, or they're gonna giga buff the shield counters, but if they were gonna do that, guys, they would have included it in the patch notes, surely, right? Unless they're trolling us here, but I don't think they are. I don't think they are, bro. I think they would have been like, oh, we're making Tri-Shields 1 pip because that's what the community would want to hear, and people are happy, right? But I generally don't think they're going to do that. I think they're just like, they just don't know what they're doing at this point, you know? And it's like, it's fine if you wanted to buff shield gambits, but what you do is you compensate by buffing every other shield counter and making those either work or make the Tri-Shields or shields themselves worse, right? Because you didn't make shields worse this update at all, and you didn't make the counters better. And then you made something that was already the best like strat and tactic in the game even better, instead of nerfing the overpowered strats or buffing the underwhelming ones, right? And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video, is the devs, they say they don't make changes around the meta. But the problem is, if you don't make changes around the meta, no player is ever going to be happy with the game unless you're below 1500 rank and you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you think Lightning Bats is good at max level, for example, right? So, like, no one's going to be happy because they're not going to feel listened to. The game's not going to get updated and it's going to feel stale. And in Wiz's case, where the updates are slower in general, unlike other games, it's very important you listen to the community to keep players playing the game feel listened to, and they don't feel neglected and alienated or isolated, and then that people don't queue their school, right? I've seen 2 storms queue in the past week. There used to be 5 high-ranked storms, and then a ton of storms in the middle and low ranks. Now there's 2 storms in the entire game queuing for the past 6 months. Like, dude, and then it's like, it's equally as bad for like regular ice, and fire's kind of bad too, but I'd argue fire and ice are only bad because, like, why play ice when you can play, you know, balance myth or death, right? It's just better. Or why play fire when you can play death, right? There's just schools that do them better than themselves, right? So that's the thing. And the last thing I want to talk about here is gonna be a raid change, actually, where the damage stat maxes for dual schooling have been modified, so that people that are cosplaying, like Dorm, what is it, like Meyer, Dyer, that's not gonna be a thing anymore, because your damage is gonna be cut down by like, I want to say like 70-80%, maybe 100% in some cases. I'd say more like 80%, 90%. So your damage will be cut down a lot according to the school's DPP, right? So for example, I might have 100 storm damage on a death, but then 110 fire and like 150 ice or something, right? To try and match my school stats and not run into a broken cosplay meta like we've had the past couple of months, where a death, like a dorm, is better than an actual storm, right? Or a dire is better than a fire, right? Stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I want to talk about. I mean, the raid gear as well, you can upgrade all the raid gear and stuff like that, and they removed the no trade from the Shabubble shard, so that's cool as well. Yeah, but very disappointed with this update, and I honestly think I might just be done with PvP, man, because I think of how much happier I'd be if I just didn't care or wasn't part of the PvP community, you know? And I don't know, man, it's just kind of sad to see, and I don't know, I generally might just be done with PvP, because I'll probably just make that into a whole other video, honestly. But that's everything I want to say for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next one. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down there in the comments below, and thanks for watching. Take care.